LaShawn Bold, voicing for Chapter 1 in the Hepworth, Rooney, and Strong Godfrey course text, Direct Social Work Practice, Theories and Skills. This is Chapter 1, The Challenges and Opportunities of Social Work. In this chapter, we're going to understand the context, mission, and purposes of social work services. We're going to identify value perspectives that guide our social workers. We're going to learn to appreciate the role of systems and ecological concepts for understanding the interaction of individuals and families within their environment. We're going to describe competencies that you will be expected to achieve in your academic career. And we're going to reflect on our perspectives of diversity that will guide how we present various issues in social work. Social workers seek to promote human and community well-being. We seek to enhance the quality of human life, promote social and economic justice, and eliminate poverty. We see a variety of types of clients. Sometimes they're legally mandated, sometimes they're voluntary, and sometimes our clients are non-voluntary. Our mission and purposes are to enhance human well-being. We focus on marginalized groups and try to empower those who are marginalized. We also have an emphasis on global and cultural sensitivity. The purposes of social work are to help clients achieve specific objectives, and our objectives are going to vary on the circumstances of each client. We try to perform preventative, restorative, and remedial functions. So we try to help prevent clients from becoming disempowered. We try to restore clients who have become disempowered, and we try to be somewhat of a remedial in that we will assist in making things better for the long term. We have regard for individual worth and dignity, and our relationships are driven by mutual participation. We believe that people want to mutually participate in their relationships, that they want to be accepted. We believe in confidentiality, honesty, and responsible handling of conflict. We have a respect for individual rights, and we have a commitment in assisting clients to obtain required resources. Social workers maintain a level of perseverance to make social institutions more humane and responsive. It's an ongoing process of our social work values throughout a lifetime, really. We engage in diversity and differences in various practices of people. And we have some core competencies from the Council of Social Work Education. These are what we abide by as an accredited university, School of Social Work. We believe that students need to understand ethical standards, relevant laws, and regulations affecting practice. We believe that students need to appreciate diversity and difference and advance human rights and social justice. We also believe that students need to learn to engage in practice-informed research and research-informed practice, and that students need to learn about policy and how to engage with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities, how to assess and intervene and evaluate individuals, families, groups, and organizations, and that students need to know how to critically analyze and monitor and evaluate interventions. An effective social work practice requires that we know about micro-level practice, meso-level practice, and macro-level practice. And hopefully, by this stage in your education, you have somewhat of an understanding of micro, meso, and macro. But to review, micro-level practice is working with individuals, meso-level practice is working with people in groups, and macro-level practice is working with people in large groups, communities, and organizations. We have some various frameworks that help us achieve our competencies. We look at the ecological systems model that helps us understand strengths and weaknesses between people who interact with their families, environments, cultures, and what that looks like. We look at where people are, how their habitats and where they live influence their situations. And we believe that our assessment requires us to be thorough and have a knowledge of diverse systems and how those systems may interact, like how people interact with their environments. Social workers must assess the sources of the problems and determine what should be done related to the systems. So we don't do anything without an assessment, and we have to determine what is the source of this person's issues, or what is the source of the problem. If we're looking at a community or an organization, what is the main source of the problem? And we have to really deeply assess that using our knowledge base of research knowledge. We use systems theory, and it's useful in all considerations. There is one limitation of the systems theory, and that's the systems theory does not specifically guide us in intervention necessarily. It tells us about systems and how systems interact, but we need to know a little bit more about how to actually engage and involve those systems in process change. So here we have a figure. I'm going to start with the first arrow, which is school attendance. So let's say we're looking at the target system, okay? So let's say school attendance is the issue. So we want to make sure that we collaborate with school officials, that we work with the teacher to ready children for school, or we work with the client. So in this case, we're looking at Mrs. Ramirez, and she is one of the cases, the case example on page 4. And in Mrs. Ramirez's case, she was referred to child welfare because her 2 elementary school age children had more than 7 days of unexcused absences from school during the term, when the standard for educational neglect in her state is less than that. When her son Tobias, let me back up. When Tobias, the child social welfare worker, met with Mrs. Ramirez, he found that children had missed similar amounts of time when they lived in another state. Perhaps you want to read this yourself. I'm not going to read the entire thing on page 4 of the course text. But let's look how it's broken down if we think about what the target system is. So the target system in the middle is the focus of the change effort. So the people are the problems to influence in order to achieve the client goals. So in this case, we are targeting Mrs. Ramirez and her issues that she has and how to meet her goals. So as a social worker, we look at what exactly is the target system here and what are we trying to influence change. And so we know that in this case study that Mrs. Ramirez's physical and psychological health is important, and so we make a referral for psychological and a physical assessment because that's affecting whether her children make it to school or not. The other target system and the issue that's coming out here is the school attendance. So the change in the middle is that the children are suffering because they haven't been going to school, and Mrs. Ramirez is suffering. So we have this target system, and we look at 2 different areas that we've identified. So we got Mrs. Ramirez, her physical and psychological health, and school attendance. If we focus on Mrs. Ramirez, which is one of the factors involved here, we need to make a referral to psychological and physical assessment. Then once we look at that, when we look at school attendance for the children, we need to collaborate with the school officials. We need to work with Mrs. Ramirez to get the children ready for school, and we need to explore some other alternatives for transportation. So that's an example of how you would lay out the target system intervention there, or how you want to plan this out, how you're going to help this client. Okay, so here's another way to put it. The client system is the people who request or are expected to benefit from the services. So the client system is Mrs. Ramirez and her school-age children. The action system is the formal or informal resources who we need to cooperate with as the social worker to help the client achieve their goals. So the action system that we're involving is school and the school attendance, okay? And this would involve working with school officials, Mrs. Ramirez and her children, and the neighborhoods and religious resources around transportation. That would be the action system that we've tried to and are going to attempt to involve in effecting change with this client. So we also have an agency system. The agency systems are the formal subsets of the action system who must cooperate to achieve the client goals. So one of the systems that they have identified here to meet the client goal is school attendance. In order to have school attendance achieved, you're going to need to involve the school system and the child welfare agency. And if you notice, there's an arrow between school system and child welfare agency. That means those two may need to interact. And that's how that agency system is going to be effective in this particular case. So when you're deciding on and carrying out specific interventions with clients, you're going to use an evidence-based practice model. Okay, practice. Evidence-based practice means that you are using a method or a model that is approved by the standards of social work. And so typically social work has various models that we ascribe to. And in this case, the process model is something that social workers use. Social workers must be trained in evidence-based approaches, and we look here at what some of the criticisms are of that is that it's more of a generalization, and sometimes the process model doesn't last very long. Some of the alternatives to using the process model are that you can use the common elements approach and common factors approach. In deciding and carrying out interventions, you have guidelines that influence the intervention selection. So how do you choose how you're going to intervene with these people? You want the intervention that has the most value and the maximum feasibility of self-determination, which is the one that will allow the clients to have the most choice, and which is the one that allows the clients to be empowered and that enhances their strengths. You're going to assess what are the circumstances from a systems perspective. So what are all of the factors involved here in choosing an intervention? Okay, so if I'm going to choose to make a referral for resources or have them go to therapy or different things, what are the various caveats to that? And in this case, we notice one of them is transportation. So we have to consider that. We also have to be sensitive to diversity. We need to understand that in this culture of this family, that maybe there are issues with parents going to counseling. Maybe there's issues with or biases that the family has with accepting help. We have to understand those kinds of things and be sensitive to those things. We can't just come in and demand, okay, you're going to do this now. We need to draw on evidence-based practices along with the client in determining how to proceed. The phrase along with the client is a pretty important factor there. We don't ever want to move ahead without the client being a part of the process. And then we need to think critically about this situation and what we're about to do and really analyze the consequences. That is the end of these notes for this particular chapter. I hope that it has been helpful to you, And if you have questions, please direct them to your instructor.